Portugal found itself wedged between a powerful neighbor and the sea, confined to a peripheral space, a true Finisterre, not only in terms of Western Europe, but even within the Iberian Peninsula itself. This situation created what has been called the Iberian impasse of the kingdom. At the time, the only viable path for carving out an independent course was through the sea, and the sea had long held a place of major importance in the life of the kingdom. The long coastline, the active involvement of coastal communities in maritime tasks like fishing, common across many stretches of the shore, salt production in areas like Aveiro, the lower Mondego, the Tagus estuary, and the Sado, and the constant movement of coastal vessels that linked cities and regions, often the fastest and safest means of travel, all contributed to a deep familiarity with the marine environment. This closeness wasn't just physical, it shaped how the sea was perceived and imagined. Portugal's geographical position, especially that of its key trading hubs, Lisbon and Porto, further reinforced this connection, particularly from the 13th century onward, when interactions with northern Atlantic Europe, regions of France, England, Flanders, and the western Mediterranean, Catalonia, Italian cities, became more frequent and intense. Although a significant portion of the population lived inland, unlike what would be the case in more recent centuries, many people from Porto, Lisbon, the Algarve coast, and other maritime areas depended on the sea for their livelihoods. In contrast to those living in inland Europe, for whom the sea was often a distant and frightening unknown, the Portuguese had a direct, regular, and physical relationship with it. Despite the very real and imagined dangers it posed, generations of interaction with the sea had made it a familiar presence, and a well-recognized source of both natural wealth and commercial opportunity. The significance of the sea did not go unnoticed by the crown itself. In the royal historiography crafted over time, the figure of Dom Fuas Rupinho appears prominently in the so-called Chronicle of 1419. He is portrayed as the admiral serving under Portugal's first king, tasked with defending the coast from Muslim naval raids, which he did. Rupinho is also credited with launching offensive operations, most notably an expedition to Ceuta around 1180 to 1190. From the reign of King Dinis onward, the role of admiral of the royal fleet became firmly established, especially after the hereditary and perpetual title was granted to the Genoese sailor Manuel Pesanha in 1317 through a typically feudal contract. This initiative was continued by King Afonso IV, who ruled from 1325 to 1357, following the same maritime-focused policies of his predecessor. The value placed on the Canary Islands also reveals just how clearly the path to the sea was beginning to emerge as a necessary direction for the Portuguese kingdom. The spread and influence of the cult of Saint Vincent, a saint whose relics were rescued from Moorish lands during the time of Afonso Henriques and brought to Lisbon in a boat accompanied by 2 ravens, reflects the maritime dimension deeply rooted in the Portuguese monarchy's self-image. As the patron saint of seafaring and maritime endeavors, Saint Vincent became closely tied to the kingdom's naval identity. His image was even incorporated into Lisbon's heraldry. The medieval city seal already displayed the boat and ravens. The association between Saint Vincent and overseas expansion was strong and direct. For instance, when the fleet headed to Ceuta in 1415 passed by Cape Saint Vincent, King Joan III commanded that the ships lower their sails as an act of reverence, seeking the saint's blessing for the conquest they were about to undertake. By invoking Saint Vincent, the new dynasty also sought to present itself as a rebirth or renewal of the kingdom, reconnecting with and reinvigorating a tradition that stretched back to the reign of the kingdom's founder, Afonso Henriques. Beyond warding off fears and dangers, the veneration of Saint Vincent and other patron saints linked to maritime activities also served to symbolically Christianize the Atlantic Ocean. Portugal's peripheral position, limited resources, the compounded hardships from the 14th century crisis, and the so-called Iberian impasse, all contributed to a growing interest in the sea among key social groups within the kingdom. For them, the ocean became a potential path forward, an escape route, so to speak. In this way, the very challenges that threaten Portugal's survival as an independent political entity, and by extension the stability of its monarchy, were transformed into the driving force behind its earliest ventures overseas. The boundaries of the known world were ready to be pushed outward.